Shadow Slave. By Guiltythree. Chapter 91, Escape. Licking his lips, Sunny cautiously said, "It's not. Not as you think, Neff. We've been caught in a trap by the soul tree. It's not benevolent. It's not protecting us. In fact, it's doing the opposite. If we don't leave this island, we'll become its slaves, forever. Or until it finds someone stronger and devours us." She tilted her head and looked at him with an unreadable expression. "Come on, Nephi's. Remember. We've talked about this already. This whole thing was your idea to begin with." For a moment, he thought that his words had awoken the stolen memories in her mind. But her response shattered those hopes into pieces. "Leave the great tree. You have really lost your mind. Curses." Changing Star raised her sword and said in a tone that made Sunny tremble, "Let Cassie go. Now." He hesitated, thinking about the best course of action. Then, he carefully placed the blind girl on the ground. "All right. I did. See. Now, listen to me. I have something very important to tell you." Before he was done speaking, Nephi's disappeared from his view. Realizing that he was about to be attacked, Sunny prepared to defend himself. However, a moment later, he was already lying on the ground, the tip of the silver sword pressed against his throat. Changing Star was standing above him, pale lights burning in her eyes. Well, that was embarrassing. All his training, all the experience he had won in countless bloody battles, all the power he had gained. Sunny had really thought that he stood a decent chance of standing his ground in a fight against Nephi's, maybe even reaching a tie. But in the end, he had only lasted a second. One would be tempted to call this shameful display a premature capitulation. "Nice one, idiot. Now stop fooling around and focus." Feeling the cold steel touching his skin, Sunny tried to move as little as possible. He was pretty sure that Changing Star wouldn't just kill him in cold blood, but it was still better to not give her any reasons to do something drastic. After all, Neff's mind was not all there. Looking up at her cold, indifferent face, Sunny strained his vocal cords and shouted in exasperation, "Aster, Song, Vale." Nephi's hand trembled, making a drop of blood roll down his neck. Her eyes opened wide, full of surprise and shock. Then, a dark expression appeared on her face. Pressing slightly on the sword, she took a step forward and pierced him with a burning gaze. When she spoke, her voice was trembling with suppressed emotions. How do you know these names? Who are you?" Sunny blinked, equally as surprised by her reaction. He had thought that these weird words were just a part of some code to jog her memory awake. But, as it turned out, they were not. Aster, Song, Vale. What the hell does it mean? What can make Nephi's lose her cool? It has to be something important. Trying to stay as still as possible, he cautiously glanced at the blade of the sword and honestly answered, "I didn't even know that these were names. It's just what you told me to tell you in case you forget what had to be done. You said if I tell you this, you'll listen to me." Nephi stared at him, a shadow of doubt appearing on her face for a split second. It was gone almost instantly, replaced by grim determination. Gritting her teeth, she snarled, "Which domain do you belong to?" Sunny had no clue what she wanted him to say. So, he just asked, "What's a domain?" She grinned, a maniacal glimmer appearing in her eyes. This was very unlike calm, composed Nephi's. If Sunny didn't know better, he would think that a completely different person was standing in front of him. A person that was much more unpredictable and dangerous. Meanwhile, Neff said, "Don't pretend to." Suddenly, she stumbled, then frowned. It seemed as though Sunny's question touched something in Changing Star's mind, causing a chain reaction. A few seconds passed, each turning her frown deeper. Slowly, the familiar poised calmness returned to her eyes. It didn't seem as though she had remembered everything, but, just as Nephi's had promised, it seemed enough to make her listen to what Sunny had to say. He understood it from the fact that she had finally removed the tip of the sword from his throat. She even helped him stand up. Looking at Sunny with a strange expression, she then said, "I really told you those words?" Rubbing his slightly cut neck, he simply nodded. Bloodweave was already busy repairing the damage to his skin. Nephi's looked down, then closed her eyes for a few moments. When she opened them again, they were full of resolve. What do I need to do? Sunny really wanted to ask her about the meaning of the 3 mysterious names, but decided against it. They had to hurry. Ask Cassie to summon her staff. Then get her into the boat. Dismissing her sword, Changing Star glanced at him for the last time and walked toward her friend. Somehow, Nephi's had managed to talk Cassie into following her and boarding the ghastly vessel. She probably had to lie about a lot of things, but Sunny didn't want to ask, afraid that his flaw would ruin everything. Once the girls were inside the boat, he wrapped his tired body into the shadow and put his hands on the metal hull. Every part of his body seemed to hurt in its own unique way. His mind was utterly exhausted. Come on, Sunny. One last push. With a crooked smile, he strained his muscles and pushed the boat toward black water. As the last light of dusk disappeared, submerging the world into absolute darkness, the boat built from the bones of a demon slipped from the ashen sand into the cold embrace of the dark sea. Following Sunny's instructions, Cassie aimed her staff and activated its enchantment, causing a strong gale to fill their modest sail. At first, the boat moved slowly, the mast creaking under pressure. But Changing Star's craftsmanship was meticulous and reliable. The demon's spine held, and little by little, the small vessel began to gain speed. Sunny sat at the stern, controlling the steering oar. In front of them, an endless expanse of black water stretched to the horizon, hiding indescribable horrors in its depths. Behind them, the terrifying soul-devouring tree was slowly growing smaller. Sunny stared at it, feeling a deep sense of regret grip his heart. He wished that he was powerful enough to destroy it. Leaving just like that, without exacting revenge on the ancient monster, filled him with anger. Well. At least he left it a present. Back at the Ashen Barrow, a candle was burning in a small alcove of stones that protected its flame from wind. Near the candle, a tall pile of dry, fallen leaves was towering over the alcove. It had taken Sunny a long time to gather that pile. He had scoured most of the island, hoping to make it as tall as possible. He had also mixed dry seaweed and the remaining fat of the carapace demon into the leaves. Some time later, the small candle was nearing the end of its life. Most of the wax had already melted, turning it even smaller. Just as the flame was about to go out, it ignited the leaves. After a few seconds, a massive, searing bonfire ignited in the middle of the island, illuminating the scarlet leaves of the evil tree. Almost instantly, the black waters surrounding the island surged with movement. Sunny was already too far away to see any of it. He didn't know if the creatures of the dark sea would be able to obliterate the soul devourer. He strongly doubted that the ancient fiend was that easy to destroy. However, with the carapace demon dead and the 3 humans meant to replace him gone, there was no one on the island to protect the gluttonous tree. Perhaps it would be seriously harmed, at least. For now, it was the best he could do. Looking back in the direction of the Ashen Barrow, Sunny gritted his teeth and thought, one day, I will become powerful enough to destroy that tree, these monsters, and anyone else who would dare to stand in my way. One day, I will become powerful enough to never be afraid again, of anyone or anything. Instead, all of them will fear me. He didn't notice that, just as he was thinking these words, Cassie suddenly raised her head and turned in his direction. On her face, a dark expression appeared, soon erased by uncertainty and doubt. Chapter 92, Journey into the Night. In the absolute darkness, a small vessel was gliding on the black surface of a restless sea. Its mast, made of a demon's spine, was straining under the assault of the winds. In the eerie silence of this vast and lightless void, the swift boat cut through the waves like a blade. No sounds could be heard except for the creaking of bones and the crashing of water against its polished metal hull. Sunny sat at the oar, steering the carapace vessel. He was guiding them west. With no moon or stars to show them the path, it was hard to keep the boat on course. But there was a mark left in his mind by the cold and menacing shadow of the Crimson Spire. Using it as a compass, he was able to navigate the treacherous waters without losing his way. Black skies above, dark sea beneath. With nothing but a thin layer of steel separating them from the tenebrous abyss, they sailed through the night. Below them, countless horrors were hiding in the cursed depths. Several times, Sunny felt gargantuan shadows moving close to the small boat, attracted by the sound of its passing. Powerless to do anything, he had no choice but to tremble in silence, praying that the terrible creatures would turn away. So far, luck was on their side. Perhaps they were too small and feeble to satiate the hunger of these ancient leviathans. A few hours after the start of the voyage, Sonny felt that the constant pull on his mind had begun to wane. His thoughts were slowly becoming clearer, the haze of forgetfulness weakening with each minute. Soon, a ghostly sound of shattering glass resounded in his head. Instantly, the last remnants of the fog that was clouding his consciousness disappeared. He was free from the enthrallment of the soul devourer. Relieved, Sonny couldn't help but smile. However, his smile was weak and hesitant. With the effects of the mind hex gone, his usual sharpness had returned. It felt as though an invisible weight had been lifted, allowing his thoughts to finally flow unobstructed once again. Everything became clearer, as though the whole world suddenly came into focus. It was a wonderful feeling. But with it came a better understanding of how terrifying and precarious their current situation was. They were quite literally balancing on the edge of a hungry abyss, their lives relying on nothing but capricious fortune. The decision to venture into the dark expanse of the cursed sea on a makeshift boat was pure insanity. But then again, there was nothing sane about the forgotten shore to begin with. In this desolate hell, the craziest choice was sometimes the best one you had. Gritting his teeth, Sonny held the oar and stared into the darkness. A few minutes later, Cassie suddenly shifted, making the boat gently sway. She handed the magical staff to Nephi's and cautiously moved closer to Sonny, feeling her way through the darkness with her hands. Before Sonny could guess what was it that she wanted from him, he was suddenly caught in a tight embrace. The blind girl hid her face in his chest, hot tears streaming down her face. Sonny froze, stunned, and having no idea what to do. He could feel Cassie's body pressed against him and shaking from crying, her hands tightly wrapped around his neck. While he was trying to comprehend the situation, she quietly whispered, "Thank you. Thank you." Feeling extremely awkward, Sonny pretended to clear his throat. No need to thank me. If it wasn't for your warning, we would still be stuck on that island. So, we're even." Then, he raised his hand and awkwardly patted her on the back. Both of them were careful to keep their voices as quiet as possible, afraid that they will attract something from the black depths. Cassie silently cried for several minutes, then finally let go of him. Wiping her face, she pulled her body away and whispered, "I'm sorry." Her voice sounded a bit strange. Confused, Sonny raised his eyebrows. What is she apologizing for? I'm sorry too. For, grabbing you back then. She smiled and, wiping the last tear from her face, turned away to move back to the middle of the boat. Sonny was left alone once again. With nothing to do except for holding the steering oar, he let his thoughts wander. With his mind clear again, many things were worth revisiting. He had to distract himself from the eerie pressure of the endless dark emptiness somehow, anyway. Despite the fact that their experience with the Soul Devourer was nothing short of harrowing, Sonny had somehow managed to end up considerably better off on the other end of it. His haul this time was truly unbelievable. He had received an amazing new weapon, no less than 100 shadow fragments, and 2 new attributes. Spark of Divinity was a real improvement over its previous version. The ability to perceive the inner structure of memories alone opened a whole new horizon of possibilities. However, he was more interested in the mysterious blood weave. Somehow, Sonny felt that he had severely underestimated the uniqueness and importance of that attribute. Its origins, too, were covered in a veil of secrets. Who was that weaver whose ichor he had consumed? Who were the unknown that even the spell was reluctant to mention? What was their connection to the gods? Why were the type and rank of the initial memory he had received from the vile thieving bird's spawn left empty? How was it even possible for a memory to give an awakened new attributes? That last question guided him to think of something else. Glancing up, he stared at Nephi's and tried to recollect their conversation. Looking back, she had revealed a lot of things that he had failed to notice in the moment. First of all, Sonny now knew that Cassie's enchanted armor, which had been given to her by Changing Star, was an awakened memory of the 6th tier. That meant that it came from an awakened terror, a nightmare creature 1 class above Mountain King that he himself had killed in his first nightmare. The secret of how Changing Star had managed to earn her true name was now 1 step closer to being revealed. Chapter 93, Blackwater. Apparently, as far as accomplishing the impossible went, Nephi's had outdone even Sonny. An aspirant triumphing over an awakened tyrant was already unbelievable enough. But killing an awakened terror gave the word unbelievable a whole new meaning. No wonder her aspect ability is so versatile. Now, he was almost sure that Changing Star's aspect was of the divine rank, just like his. That would explain why she was able to both heal and destroy with her strange and formidable powers, a combination as rare as his own shadow control. What's the probability of two sleepers with divine aspects ending up so close to each other in the dream realm? Close to zero. It seemed like the unpredictable, fated, attribute had twisted the strings of fate once again. Sunny felt shivers running down his spine. His innate attribute was capable of bringing both terrible curses and incredible blessings. At first glance, their meeting with Nephi seemed like the latter. But, if it was truly the result of, fated, manipulating destiny, it could turn out to be the worst of calamities in the end. After all, one of the possible meanings of her true name was Star of Ruin. The fear he had felt in that short moment before crossing swords with Nephi's was still fresh in Sunny's mind. And there were other things that she had revealed, too. She apparently knew something about the drop of ichor, being that she had called it a lineage memory without batting an eye. That suggested that Nephi's knew much more about the spell than Sunny and the rest of the public did. It seemed as though there were secrets in the upper echelons of Awakened that they didn't want anyone else to know. The three mysterious names she had told him might have been another of these secrets. And that last word she used, asking which domain he belonged to. What were these domains? So many questions. Sunny spent many hours pondering them, as well as going over all the information about the forgotten shore he had gathered. The carapace boat flew over the dark water, drawing closer and closer to the western horizon. Soon, he felt that the night was already drawing its last breaths. The light of hope ignited in Sunny's heart. However, this was when their luck had finally run out. The disaster came unexpected, violently throwing them into a void of confusion. This time, Sunny had not felt anything approaching the boat. The danger simply appeared out of nowhere, leaving him no time to react. 1 second, the black waters were calm and clear. The next, they were boiling with movement, grotesque tentacles rising from them and wrapping themselves around the hull of the boat. Sunny tried to jump to his feet, but at that moment, the whole vessel was violently jerked to the side. Falling, he heard the moans of metal being bent and torn apart. Then, salty water filled his mouth. Rising, he caught a glimpse of Nephi standing at the bow of the boat, her silver sword lashing out at the approaching tentacle. However, blinded by darkness, she failed to notice a different threat. Another tentacle twisted and coiled around her body. Then, without even a scream, she was gone, dragged into the dark depths, with no hope to return. All that remained was a long blade stuck helplessly in the bulbous flesh of the massive tentacle. Sunny's eyes widened in disbelief. No, no, no. This can't be happening. The hull of the carapace vessel was then crushed and torn into pieces, throwing him into the cold, black water. For a moment, Sunny was stunned by the coldness. Then, wrapping the shadow around his body, he swam up, trying to reach the surface. Soon, he succeeded and spun, trying to see something. Anything. To give him hope. But there was nothing around, only undulating waves and twisting tentacles. Except for... Far in the distance, Sunny noticed an unclear shape rising above the water. He strained his eyes, trying to discern its nature. Then, his heart skipped a beat. A few hundred meters away, a giant stone hand towered above the surface of the sea, its palm opened as though trying to embrace the sky. It was slender and delicate, carved by the unknown sculptor with almost inhuman skill. If Sunny didn't know better, he would have thought that the hand belonged to a living, breathing being. But all of this didn't matter right now. All that mattered was that he had a chance to survive. Straining every muscle in his body, Sunny dodged a twisting tentacle and swam toward the hand, moving as fast as he could. But then, he suddenly stopped. And looked back. Misshapen pieces of metal and bone, all that remained of their boat, were floating on the surface of the dark sea. He had seen Neff being pulled under the water by the tentacles of the unknown creature, but Cassie, clad in her enchanted attention-repelling tunic, had a chance to escape. He couldn't just leave without at least trying to find her. Or can I? A dark thought appeared in Sunny's mind. After all, his own survival was the only thing that really mattered. Everything else was just a distraction. Why don't you think about yourself for a second? Are you really going to risk your precious life on the off chance that this helpless girl is still alive? He hesitated. Admit it, she is nothing but a burden. You always knew that one day she was going to drag you down. Yes, he did. But what? You're going to die, fool. Turn around and flee, now. Why was he even hesitating? This was his chance to escape. His only chance, perhaps. He had to survive. Feeling an almost unbearable feeling of regret filling his chest, Sonny slowly inhaled. Then, he gritted his teeth and dove down, heading back to the spot where their boat had been destroyed. What are you doing? Have you lost your mind? He couldn't see in the black water, but his shadow sense was still somewhat effective. He had a chance to feel Cassie's presence, at least if she wasn't already dead and dragged to the bottom of this cursed abyss. You fool. How is she worth it? Why are you doing this? Grimacing, he forced his annoying inner voice to shut up. In his mind, the answer was clear, because I want to.